Hello, I'm Minty, and welcome back to the Near Mint Gideon YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about 5 cards that you should be running in your white deck. Like with my previous video, I want to narrow this topic to give you some really impactful cards within a specific area of the game. And today, we're going to talk about ETB effects in white. ETB means enter the battlefield. So some creatures, when they enter the battlefield, have a triggered ability, and you can use that to gain advantage in the game. White is actually one of the best colours at taking advantage of ETB effects because it has many different ways of using and reusing the ETB effect that the creature gives you, and also some really powerful ETB effects in its colour wheel anyway. With that being said, let's move on to the first card on my list. Luminate Primordial. This is part of the Primordial cycle. It's the white one, and this cycle was basically designed for Commander, in my opinion, because when these creatures enter the battlefield, for each opponent you get an effect. So for the red one, you steal some creatures. For the black one, you reanimate some creatures from your opponent's graveyards, and all of them are really powerful, but I think the white one gets overlooked, and the white one's really good. So when it enters the battlefield, you exile up to one target creature for each opponent, and then they gain life equal to the creature's power. So basically, this swords to plowshares something from everyone's board on ETB. 7 mana is a big upfront cost. However, once it's on the battlefield, this creature can get really out of control because you can constantly use its ETB effect over and over again with cards that I'm going to talk about later on in the video, and keep constantly exiling your opponent's biggest threat from their board. I've had situations in games where I'm reusing the ETB so much that the life gain that I'm giving my opponents actually becomes problematic and I can't kill them. That's how many creatures I'm exiling with Luminate Primordial. So if you're looking for a big body that acts as some more removal in your white decks, maybe give Luminate Primordial another look. Card number 2 on my list is Cavalier of Dawn, and this one might be one of my favourites. So, 5 mana for a 4/6 Vigilant Elemental Knight, and when it enters the battlefield, you can destroy up to 1 non-land permanent, and its controller makes a 3/3 colourless golem. Then the second line of text says, when Cavalier of Dawn dies, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So, not only is this card removal, it's also a little bit of insurance to let you get something back out of your graveyard if you need to in the late game. Reusing its enter the battlefield effect can be very devastating for your opponents, picking off important non-land permanents and giving them 3/3 golems instead. The fact that it has vigilance is really important, meaning you can swing in for damage and still block the golems that you're giving people with the Cavalier itself. White relies on its artifacts and enchantments also to gain advantage, especially in terms of ramp. So when this dies, you can get back an important artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand and recast it later on. So you can ensure yourself against board wipes or targeted removal for your enchantments too. A clever trick with this card is, as it enters the battlefield, choose the Cavalier as the target for its own ability, so then it dies straight away, you get a 3/3 golem, and you get to return an artifact or enchantment to your hand, which I really like and can be a lifesaver in certain situations. The one thing that I'd wish they'd put on this card is I wish that dies trigger was a leave the battlefield effect instead. So I wish it read, when the Cavalier leaves the battlefield, you get the artifact or enchantment back to your hand, because then you could use these flicker effects and you could use these blink effects to great advantage in your white deck by constantly recurring stuff from your graveyard too. And I think that would have been really, really cool. I like it the way it is, but it would have been awesome to have a leave the battlefield effect instead, as opposed to a dies trigger. That's where I think white should be exploring in its development, is both enter the battlefield effects and leave the battlefield effects. I think if we could pack white full of these leave the battlefield effects and enter the battlefield effects, we could have a whole new branch of of white synergy that would all work really well together. So maybe something for Wizards of the Coast to look at in the future. The next card on my list is Archon of the Coronation. I'm sticking to the theme of having one card from Commander Legends in my review of white, I suppose that's what you call this. And no one's talking about Archon of the Coronation. I think it's really good, so I'm going to talk about it. So it's a 6 mana, 5/5 flying Archon, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. Yes, we love the Monarch mechanic. Its second line of text says, as long as you are the Monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. The interesting point here being, you still take the damage, it just doesn't cause you to lose life. So you can lose the monarchy from taking damage. If this read, you can't take damage, then you'd constantly keep the monarchy and it would be completely busted. However, there are some ways, in my opinion, of being really tricky with this card, and that is by using instant speed flicker effects, and you can basically fog out combat. So take the example of someone swinging a lot of power and toughness at you. You have the Archon on board, you cast a Cloud Shift on the Archon, it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, the attack goes through and deals you damage, but the damage doesn't cause you to lose life. So you can fog combat using instant speed flicker effects with this guy, and that is really powerful. Also, and this might be stating the obvious, Eldrazi Displacer is really good with this card. So Eldrazi Displacer is an Eldrazi, you can pay 3 mana and you can exile a target creature and then return it to the battlefield, tapped under its owner's control. So with this on the battlefield, if you constantly keep 3 mana up, you can never take damage, which is pretty good. Well, you do take damage, you just don't lose the life, which is still pretty amazing. So I really like the trickiness of this new card, and I really like that it fits into white so well. So if you're looking for a big flyer that gets you to draw cards in white and has loads of tricky synergy with it and can protect you from a load of damage, maybe check out Archon of the Coronation. So throughout this video I've been talking a lot about flicker effects, and yet I haven't mentioned a single flicker effect as one of my cards on my list. Card number 4 is a flicker effect, and it's one of my favourites. It's a 1 mana instant, and it's called Ephemerate. Ephemerate is just a strictly better Cloud Shift, because Ephemerate has Rebound. So for 1 white mana, you get to exile something now and return it to the battlefield, and exile something at the beginning of your next upkeep and return it to the battlefield. So this, with something like a Solemn Simulacrum, is just insane. You basically get a 1 mana Rampant Growth twice, so a 1 mana Explosive Vegetation, and that's with just a Solemn Simulacrum. Imagine this with a Luminate Primordial. It's also instant speed, so it can protect your creatures from removal, and you can use it with Archon of the Coronation to fog combat and maintain the monarchy during your next upkeep. So Ephemerate, if you're not running it in your Blink style decks, you definitely should be. It's a really, really excellent card and a really good include in any ETB style deck. The final card on my list is Profound Journey, and I'm classing this as an ETB card because it can help you rebuy your ETB effects in a slightly different way. One thing that white is actually quite good at is returning permanents from the graveyard to the battlefield. So if you're running a deck that has a lot of impactful permanents, and you should be, and you want to insure yourself against board wipes, or maybe even actually go on a sort of reanimation style plan, Profound Journey should be an automatic include in one of those decks. I really like it in Planeswalker decks because, as I said before, it returns a permanent to the battlefield, which means you can get Planeswalkers with it, and that's obviously very powerful. You could also return your Cavalier of Dawn from the graveyard to the battlefield and use its ETB again, or even any of the cards I've mentioned in this list, apart from Ephemerate, obviously. The main upside with Profound Journey is that it has Rebound, so you don't just get 1 permanent out of the bin, you get 2 permanents out of the bin, which can be very, very impactful in the late game. Obviously 7 mana is a pretty steep cost, but I think it's a cost worth paying if you're in the right deck, for this card. No real amazing synergy here, just really good value. So those are my top 5 cards for white this year. I'll do another video next year on cards that I'm including more and more of in my decks for each colour, and see how my impression of the format changes from now until then. Let me know what you think of the cards in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.